This is our main sanctuary. Many synagogues, if not all of them, will have a main sanctuary. And you primarily know that because it is generally large like this. There's usually some stained glass windows. Is there a feeling that you particularly get when you come in here? Like, how does it feel physically to you? Calm? Okay. Yeah. That's definitely something that I think sanctuaries try to impart to people when they come in there, right, is a sense of calmness, a sense of ease. Sometimes you also get a sense, depending on the synagogue that you go to, a real sense of humility, right? Because right at the center, right, where like all of our vision and all the lines are kind of drawn to in this place is what we call the Ark. That's where we house our copies of the Torah, right, which is effectively the Jewish Bible. The Jewish Bible is a little bit bigger than that, but it's the first 5 books of the Jewish Bible anyway, kind of our main body of Jewish law, or at least our first body of Jewish law. And in a lot of synagogues, that Ark will be huge, it'll be enormous, and kind of people sitting around it, the juxtaposition makes them feel small, makes them feel humble. And it's like that way in some congregations, and in others it's not. This is a pretty big main sanctuary, and yet it's also pretty small in comparison to most of the main sanctuaries that you might see in different parts of the country. This houses about, I want to say 600 to 650 people, and that's a lot, but again, in terms of main sanctuaries, that's not that much. There are some which hold maybe twice as much. You can come further out, and I'll just a security door. This is different at every congregation. Most congregations will just have big doors that lock, but this one has one that goes up. The Torah tells us that when the Israelites were in the desert, they walked around with like a portable, what's called a mishkan, a portable dwelling place for God. And that had various instructions for the type of area they were supposed to build for God, the type of housing they were supposed to give for their sacred objects. And we try to mimic that somewhat. The ark at the center of our sanctuaries is meant to mimic that mishkan, that dwelling place for God. The curtain on the front is also meant to mimic that as well. We have an eternal light. See this lamp hanging right down there? That's a staple, along with the ark. That's a staple of any sanctuary, of any Jewish sanctuary, whether it be Reformed, Conservative, and Orthodox. These two things are always there. The idea is that they go back to those elements that we had while the Israelites were wandering in the desert. It's an eternal light because we're told to keep an eternal flame burning in the synagogue or in this house of God, specifically to signify God's constant presence, right? The flame flickers there, and so therefore we also believe God is physically present, or at least has a presence in this room and in this building. You can come up on we call this the bima, it's the stage. You can come on up. It's okay, I'll show you the Torah. So we have a lot of Torahs here. Some are given to us by families who buy them. Some are just kind of always been part of the congregation. When the congregation first started, people may have donated them or the congregation bought them. They can tend to be rather expensive. And we have one saved over from the Holocaust as well. It's a little bit further back in there. But this is a Torah. It's adorned pretty nicely, right? Why would you think that we would put all this stuff on top of a Torah? Random guesses. Well, why do you wear earrings or necklaces?
To accessorize?
Well, to accessorize is one thing, right? So yeah, these are like holy accessories, right? But they're also for beautification, right? They make you look prettier. There's something prettier about your ears or your neckline when you put a piece of jewelry on, right? It sparkles a little bit more, it draws people's attention to it, and that's kind of what we're doing with this stuff. All this stuff also mimics They were priests, much like we have now, but they were priests way back in the Bible days, and they used to wear special headgear and special outfits. And this mimics a breastplate that the priests used to wear. If you notice that it's 12 different symbols on it, all representing the 12 tribes of Israel. And that was a staple of what the high priest wore way back in Bible days. They also wore hats, and they had bells on their outfits so people would know that they were coming. And that's what these also signify as well, and they relate back to. We read, in the Jewish tradition, you read from the Torah, again, the first 5 books of the Bible, so that's Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And we read from it 3 times a week, and including one of those times is Saturday. I'll show you exactly what happens. So, people will be sitting in the pews, and it'll come time to read from the Torah, and we'll take it out, and we'll actually march it around so everyone can get a chance to see it, touch it, and even kiss it. It's considered a sign of love if you give a kiss to the Torah. If you kiss your hand and then touch the Torah like that, or you touch it and then kiss your hand. And then we'll bring it up here, we'll wrap it, and people will gather around it, and then we'll start reading it out loud for the entire congregation to hear. If you come around, right, this is essentially what you find in every Torah scroll, right? Someone can come over here and you can hold this this piece of wood right here. Thanks. It's written on deer parchment, right? In order to hold it a little bit more, technically we're not supposed to be touching it with our fingers, just because our hands have oil on them. You don't know what else you touch during the day, and you don't want to kind of get it all gunky and mess it up with the oils. It costs a lot to also repair as well. These can cost up to $20,000 to repair, and you may not even get a great repair, and they can be even more to kind of commission from the very beginning. They take a long time to write. And there is a special blessing said for each word, and these are all handwritten as well. So if you want to come take a closer look, you can see how in the parchment there are lines indented here to help the person who is writing along stay on an even field of a conversation. And like I said, this contains the first 5 books of the Bible, what a lot of people call the Old Testament. From the beginning, it starts all the way on the right, and it goes all the way to the end, and takes a year. Well, the way we've got it set up, it takes a year to complete. And then, once we get to the end, we start back all the way back at the beginning. We just kind of read it over again. But this is also, the Torah is also central to Judaism in that it's the first work of Jewish law that we have. Torah literally means like teaching. It comes, or at least it shares a root with the word for parents in Hebrew. And so there's an idea between, or behind the idea of like parents naturally being educators or being the ones to educate their children about what the Torah says. Right? There's somewhat of a link there if you really wanted to make the point. And not only does it create or contain any number of different stories, like you've heard of Noah and the flood, right? It contains that story. You've heard of the Garden of Eden, right, and Adam and Eve. You've heard of the Tower of Babel, right? Did you hear about that story? The people wanted to build the tower so high up, and then God didn't like it, so he destroyed it. Okay. It contains that story. It also contains, the popular pieces about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, and all those stories. It includes the story of Moses and the Israelites' exodus from Egypt, which we're celebrating right now on the holiday of Passover. So it contains all those, and in addition, it also contains a whole bunch of laws, right? Different things to do as priests, different things to do as just people kind of being part of a community, and all those laws are God-given laws. So this is our first body of Jewish law, and every other piece of work that's come after this in the history of Judaism has sought to really try to understand what's written in the there are a whole bunch of people who thought we need to explain what's written in the Torah much better so everyone can understand it and so it can still remain relevant and living. We call the Torah a living document, so it still has significance and relevance and authority in our lives today. And so there have been any number of different pieces of work that have come out of the Jewish tradition, all trying to explain what's written in the Torah.